She hid her laugh behind a porcelain teacup and in Mandarin called me clueless at my own son's engagement dinner, certain I wouldn't understand, until I set my chopsticks down and replied, calm as winter glass, wo ting da dong. Steam from bamboo baskets fogged my glasses while red lanterns washed the room in a warm Chinatown glow. The Lazy Susan spun with glistening duck and shumai, plum sauce catching the light. Metal carts rattled past in Flushing's Saturday Crush, the air thick with ginger and soy. Her smile stalled, eyes darting to Ethan, and the table went tighter than a drum. I'm Margaret, 66, and I felt the heat of humiliation cool into something sharper. Lily's lacquered nails hovered mid-air, the last curl of her smirk collapsing. Ethan's chopsticks trembled, color draining from his face like tea steeped too long. At the next table, a family laughed over sesame balls, blind to the small earthquake under our plates. The waitress topped off our jasmine, the amber stream hissing in my ears like a fuse. You're wondering how I understood every word she believed was safe behind a language barrier. I'll tell you why I kept a second tongue tucked behind a polite smile, how it rode the 7 train with me for years, and why I chose this exact moment to use it. I'll show you how a lifetime of small courtesies met one sharp insult and split open. And I'll tell you what I said next that turned a pleasant dinner into a reckoning for all 3 of us. If you believe respect doesn't need translation, subscribe to follow stories like this. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I felt the room with its chatter and clatter and the hiss of kettles and metal carts lean toward us. Lily's mother paused with her teacup at her mouth, and Lily's father's chopsticks hovered mid-air above a shrimp dumpling. I looked at Lily's face. Perfect makeup, neat bob tucked behind one ear, eyes as smooth as a still pond. And I let my words land like a calm hand on a hot stove. Li mao bu shu yao fan yi, I said. Courtesy doesn't need translation. It's a simple sentence, and I'm no poet in Mandarin, but the pronunciation mattered. There was a small bow in the way my mouth worked around the syllables. Years of practice gave them a home. The waitress behind me caught a glimpse of me over the bamboo baskets and made a sound that was either surprise or a laugh she swallowed quickly. I turned to Lily's parents and switched to English, slow and clear, the way I used to talk to the families who came to register their children at the elementary school. I apologize if I misunderstood anything. Sometimes I get words wrong, but I hope we can all keep things kind. Lily's mother blinked fast and nodded, her face a vase of fixed politeness. Her father coughed softly into his napkin. Ethan looked like he was about to drop his chopsticks. Lily, though. Lily set her teacup down with the edge of a clink. Margaret, she said in English, her smile reassembled but not quite right. It was a joke. I was saying you were very independent. That you like to do things your own way. You know how some moms can be. I was admiring it. That was not what she had said, and I could hear the way her Mandarin had slid around words like clueless and old-fashioned, like a dancer in slick shoes. I didn't list her vocabulary in front of the shrimp dumplings. I did not keep score out loud. I reached for the Lazy Susan and spun it gently, the lacquered circle gliding the noodles toward Lily's father. I enjoy learning new ways, I said. That's how I understood what you said. I turned to Lily again. Would you like some more duck? Her mouth opened, then shut. She reached for a scallion pancake she didn't eat. At the next table, someone tried to coax a toddler to eat a piece of bok choy, clucking and negotiating with small, open palms. The smells of sesame and garlic and the steam hanging like a veil above our table anchored me, kept my breath steady. But inside, behind the place where I held my smile, old rooms were opening. Rooms where train wheels and fluorescent lights hum, doors that had been closed for years. There was a time when every Saturday smelled like pine sol and the inside of a lunchbox. I was 29 and the mother of an 8-year-old boy who had once put a frog in his pocket because he said it looked cold. I worked the front office of PS 89 on Northern Boulevard, the kind of job that made you everyone's first stop and last hope. The phones rang with questions about bus routes and vaccination records, and the door opened for moms with toddlers on their hips, abuelas with warm eyes, fathers with calloused hands, and baseball caps low over their brows. Somewhere along the way, the neighborhood had shifted under my feet. Irish storefronts giving way to Korean bakeries, Puerto Rican bodegas sharing blocks with Chinese grocers whose vegetables spilled onto the sidewalk in neat, verdant stacks. "Miss Margaret," the children called me, and I wore the name like a coat on a February morning. I learned how to spot a lost look from across the crowded hallway and how to make the copier stop jamming with a whisper and a firm hand. I learned how to get a room of waiting parents to smile by refilling the chipped coffee pot, by passing out little cups of juice to tired little ones, by knowing hello in as many languages as would fit on my tongue. Ni hao, I practiced, then quickly added siexi, because please and thank you are two halves of a door. The building's night janitor, Mr. Han, laughed when he heard me, and the next evening when I stayed late to finish filing, showed me how to say goodnight. Wanan. He had grandbabies in Elmhurst and arthritis in his knees, and he taught me new words one at a time, like seeds pressed into soil. After the divorce, friendly enough, if you could call dividing a life into careful labeled boxes friendly, money split into thin sheets that needed stretching. I took on an evening job at the Queens Public Library on Casena Boulevard, shelving returns and gently telling teenagers that group study didn't have to sound like a block party. The 7 train became my chaperone and confessor, that silver ribbon pulling through neighborhoods like an old aunt who knows where everyone lives. I pressed my Metro card to the reader and learned the rhythm of stops. 52nd Street, 61st Woodside, Junction Boulevard, a city inside my pocket. On my dinner breaks, I sprinkled salt on a hard-boiled egg and ate it with a banana, listening to a mother at the next table murmur to her son in Mandarin. Beautiful, thrumming language. It reminded me of rain on a tin roof, the way pitch rose and fell. It reminded me of starting over, which I had to do, whether I liked the way it sounded or not. It was at the library that I met May. She was small and fierce and wore bright sweaters in the winter like flags. She came to the adult learning classes I helped set up, and when she saw the little stack of language guides I kept on the desk, pale blue Chinese characters marching across thin pages, she laughed and put a hand over mine. "You help me with English," she said, halting, careful, "and I help you with Chinese." We made a deal. I corrected her verbs and taught her that Queens Boulevard was not the same as Queensboro Bridge, and she taught me how to say things that mattered in a room full of shy people. Duibuki. I'm sorry. Wo lai wan le. I am late. Mei guanxi. It's all right. On Saturdays, if I could afford it, I'd stop by a Chinese bakery on Main Street and buy a bag of warm egg tarts for Ethan. He was a long-limbed teenager by then, growing faster than a weed, kind and messy, always hungry. When I handed him a tart, his face opened with gratitude, the way it used to when I peeled an orange a certain way and made the rind into a little flower. We'd sit on the couch and eat, and he'd tell me about a kid in his class who could do a backflip. I told him about the older man who came to the library to read the paper because his apartment was too quiet, and about the little girl who pressed her palms to the fish tank outside the doctor's office on our block and told me the fish were listening to her homework. The knife-sharp part of those years was what I didn't buy. Dresses, new shoes, vacations that weren't a subway ride to the Long Beach line. I said no to dinners out and yes to taking overtime, to double shifts, to casseroles built from coupons. I clipped and counted and put $5 in a jar labeled Ethan's Future, and on nights when the whole apartment hummed with the refrigerator's small song and my bones felt like fragile birds, I let myself imagine him at a desk in a place where smart kids raised their hands and spoke up, and no one told them money was why they couldn't. On the corner of our block lived Mrs. Wu, who smelled like jasmine and worked from home sewing beads on wedding gowns. She took care of Ethan after school when I couldn't get home in time, and in exchange, I cleaned her windows and carried her groceries and let her teach me how to say things properly. She and May both laughed gently at my tones, clucked like mother hens when I got a sentence almost right, and then clapped as if I'd given a performance. Wo ku gong zuo. I am going to work. Wo erzi hen kongming. My son is very smart. She pressed dumplings into my hands in plastic containers, and insisted that I stop calling her Mrs. Wu. "Just Auntie," she said, and I was grateful for the comfort of a title that meant family without demanding it. I did not tell many people I was learning Mandarin. There's a patience to starting new. It asks you to give it a private place, the way a seed needs soil where no one pokes it. And there was also a quiet joy in listening, in letting understanding come like a bird to a windowsill. Sometimes on the 7 train, I'd stand and close my eyes and let snippets of conversation wash over me like snippets of song. I did not eavesdrop for secrets. I listened for rhythms and the way love sounds in any language. Mama, Baba, I. If I heard something unkind, I turned my head and let it pass like a train that doesn't stop at my station. Years later, when Ethan called and told me he'd met someone, I was happy first, then curious, then protective in the way a mother is when she realizes her child is choosing a person who will stand closer to him than she will, in moments good and hard. He said her name was Lily. Hellos were exchanged, dinners planned. I pictured her hand in his. On our first meeting, she greeted me with roses wrapped in brown paper tied with twine. She wore a pale blue blouse, and her handshake was firm, her smile camera ready. "So nice to finally meet you," she said, and I believed she meant it. We met at a little place in the East Village that did a mushroom risotto the color of early spring. She told me about her job in design, clients with unrealistic deadlines, and the way she could tell a good chair from a bad one with just a glance. "It's in the bones of it," she said. She laughed at a story I told about Ethan knocking his front tooth loose on the playground and then refusing to smile for school pictures for a year. She reached across the table to squeeze his fingers. There were other dinners, other afternoons. A walk through the Queen's Botanical Garden where she took photos of peonies and walked as if she knew exactly where the path was going. At a holiday potluck, she brought sesame noodles. I brought my collard greens and cornbread because a neighbor's southern aunt had taught me once. And I liked the way cooking travels. She said the collards were a bit salty, and I smiled and said next time I'd add more vinegar. I began to notice small skids of disdain, the way you notice a scuff on a polished floor. The way she corrected me when I said Peking duck instead of Beijing duck. Her tone not instructive, but amused. The way she said, "Your building is cozy," when she came by to pick up Ethan's quilt his grandmother had made. A quilt with squares of his baby clothes sewn into the pattern, a story you could lay across your lap. The way she touched Ethan's wrist when he reached for another slice of pizza and said, "Careful, carbs," in a voice that pretended it was only thoughtful. Ethan rolled his eyes at me and grinned, but he put the slice down. Maybe she's just nervous, I told myself. People polish their edges when they meet family. People present. But there were things in her voice when she didn't think I'd understand. Slips that fell in Mandarin that sounded like whispers meant for someone else's ears. Once, at a birthday dinner for a friend, surrounded by a soft dome of laughter and the clink of forks on plates, I heard Lily say to her friend on the phone, in quick Mandarin, that Ethan's mother was, what was the word, guji, stubborn, like an old nail. I was walking behind them. She didn't see me. I took a breath and let it go, because maybe she was venting, because we all need to talk about the people we love in safe rooms sometimes, so we don't say unkind things out loud later. It was a kindness I offered her because I have been a woman in a kitchen with a friend, steam rising, a day heavy inside my shoulders, saying something I did not truly mean because I needed the lid to rattle. Then came the engagement, sparkling and shouted over in an Italian restaurant in Astoria, the whole place clapping as if the ring itself had sung. My heart cracked open with joy as if someone had struck a match in it. I hugged them both while the waiter brought out a slice of tiramisu with one candle from somewhere. I thought of the jar of Ethan's future and how it had been emptied year by year into textbooks and rent and doctor bills and a coat that kept the wind off his bones when he walked across campus that winter. He called me from a green bench and said he was lonely, and I said it would pass, and it did. The planning started. Lily sent me an email with a color palette attached, soft green and a white that had a name I couldn't place. There would be a ceremony in a garden upstate where her parents had friends on the board, a reception in a restored barn with Edison bulbs. There would be, she said, A tea ceremony, too, to honor her parents and grandparents. I loved the idea. Will there be a moment for me too? I asked gently. Something small, a reading, a candle. Lily's reply was prompt and precise. The tea ceremony would be for her family. She would welcome my presence during the other parts of the day, of course. She used the word welcome, and I felt myself standing on a threshold, invited inside to an entryway, but asked not to walk beyond a certain rug. I told Ethan I had put aside some money to help, more than he would have guessed, something I had never said out loud because pride is a jacket you wear even in summer. "Mom," he said, his face on my phone small and crinkled by the poor camera. "You don't have to." He sounded relieved. He sounded tired. He sounded like a loving son trying to stand between two women smoothing their skirts. "We'll be fine. Lily's parents, they want to take care of a lot of it." I said all right. I went to the farmer's market on Saturday and bought tomatoes that tasted like August and shared a bag of peaches with my neighbor, Mr. Delgado. I went to the Y to swim slow laps under the echoing ceiling and let the water hold the weight I didn't say. There were more emails. A request to keep my guest list small. A note about the dress code that mentioned neutral tones in the way someone mentions the weather is nice today even though there's a storm warning. A message forwarded from Lily's mother about a rehearsal dinner in Flushing, an engagement dinner at a dim sum place where the lighting would be warm and the photos would be perfect. So we found ourselves at that table with the lazy Susan and the red lanterns and a waitress whose hair was tucked back with a silver clip in the shape of a leaf. The bamboo baskets arrived with their breath still inside them, the soup dumplings delicate sacks that demanded careful attention. I lifted one gently on my spoon and took a small bite on the side, the way May had taught me, letting the steam escape so I didn't burn my tongue. Lily leaned toward her parents and whispered, her words gossamer and fast. I did not catch the whole of it at first, just the tail end where she said, "Lao Shu, old-fashioned." No, not exactly. The nuance tucked between syllables like a seed. Then she glanced at me, and it was not the content that struck, but the intent. A glance that said safe. A glance that said she would not be heard by the woman she was speaking about. I set my chopsticks down. I took off my glasses to wipe the fog from them. It was a deliberate, grandmotherly gesture, and it bought me those 3 seconds when a choice is made and a path laid, slim as a ribbon, over a ravine. I put my glasses back on and said, "Wo ting da dong." I understand. And here we were, with the ginger smelling so strong it made my mouth water and my spine a rod of something gentler than anger, stronger than hurt. Lily's eyebrows lifted, then lowered, then were smooth again. "Of course," she said now, her English crisp as a snowless January day. "Of course you understand. You're very capable." Her Mandarin had carried different flavors. I let it rest there like a bowl cooling on the windowsill. "Lily," I said softly, "I would like us to have an honest start. Honesty can be very polite." She smiled again. "We're family. We're just teasing." Family is a word you need 2 hands to lift. It is heavy, and it breaks if you drop it. I reached for the pot of jasmine tea and poured for her father, for her mother, for Lily, for Ethan, for myself. "In my family," I said, "teasing has limits, and we don't pretend not to know what the other understands." Lily's mother spoke then, her English careful but kind. "We want peace. We all want good beginning." I nodded. "Yes, so do I." And I meant it. I did not want to pry open the fault lines under the table and tumble us into them. I wanted to leave with a full belly and the possibility of a summer afternoon where we picked out flowers together and laughed over how neither of us could tell the difference between eggshell and ivory. But there are moments in life when you have to lay down a gentle boundary like painter's tape on a wall so the edges are clean when you're done. "Lily," I said, and my voice had the simple firmness I used when I told a first grader to please walk and not run. I saved up a long time for my son's future. That future includes this wedding, if I'm wanted. It includes my presence, which is a blessing I have offered freely since he learned to walk and came running back to me from the playground, palms full of sand. If I am to be by your side that day, I will come with respect for your family, for your traditions, and for you. I ask for that same respect in return, in any language you choose to speak." The waitress appeared with lotus-wrapped sticky rice, and for a strange, almost funny moment, we all thanked her at once, a chorus of jiexis and thank yous that made her smile. She set down the steamer and left as if she'd put a small mended bridge between us. Ethan found his voice, fragile but familiar. "Lily," he said, and my son's voice is a soft bell in my chest. "Mom's not wrong." Lily's eyes slid to him. I watched her swallow. She did not look at me when she said, "We'll talk later." We did not speak about it again at the table. We ate in a mannerly way. We discussed seating charts and weather. Her parents told me about the park where they like to walk in the mornings and asked my opinion of pastry types for a dessert table that sounded like a dream. I told them about the bakery on 39th Avenue where the woman behind the counter always gives you an extra pork bun if you go at the end of the day. We smiled. We lifted chopsticks like instruments in an odd symphony we all knew the notes to, even if we weren't playing the same song yet. After the meal, we stood on the sidewalk with our coats open to the cool air and exchanged polite goodbyes. The neon signs buzzed, and the streets sang with the sound of a bus heaving to a stop and then sighing away. Lily's mother hugged me, brief and formal, and said, "We will see you soon." Lily's father shook my hand and held my gaze a second longer than he had across the table. I couldn't read all of what was there, but I saw something like apology float in it and something like warning sink. Lily and Ethan walked me to the corner. The only light on that part of the sidewalk came from a bakery window where a row of mooncakes gleamed, their stamped tops shining. I turned to them both. "I love you," I said to my son. It is a sentence that never grows old. "Always." "I know," he said. He took my scarf in his fingers and straightened it, a gesture he has done for me since he was tall enough to reach. "Lily," I said, "I'd like us to talk again before the rehearsal, just the two of us." She hesitated. "I'm busy," she said. Her chin lifted a fraction, one of those movements you only notice when you're a mother who has watched a child learn to nod and shake his head before he had words. "It can be a walk," I offered. 15 minutes around the block. I can come to your apartment or meet you at the park." I left air in the suggestion. I left her a place to step in. "Okay," she said finally. "Maybe coffee, next week." It was a small, good-faith token placed in the center of the table we had metaphorically flipped. On the 7 train home, I stood with my hand around the plastic strap and let the car rock me back toward my neighborhood. I passed the stations that had held me up all these years. I watched a young woman in a puffy coat whisper the words to a song into the sleeve of her jacket, her earbuds white petals against her hair. Across from me, a grandfather held a sleeping toddler whose mouth hung open, his head heavy with trust on an older man's shoulder. 2 teenage boys laughed quietly over a video on a cracked phone. The city's breath rose and fell around us. I thought about May and Auntie Wu. I thought about their hands teaching me how to fold a dumpling so its seam was tight, and how they had touched my arm and said, "You can say this if someone is rude. Qing ni zunzhong wo yidian. Please show me a little respect." Most of the time, I never needed it. Most of the time, I found that when you show people your open palms, they open theirs back. At home, the apartment was the same as it always is. A small place with a big heart, a stack of library books by the sofa, a plant on the windowsill that seems to thrive on my forgetting to water it. I hung up my coat, took off my shoes, and put the kettle on. The radiator clanked to life like an orchestra warming up. I looked at the framed photos on the bookcase. Ethan at 5 with a gap-toothed smile. Ethan at 12 in a baseball cap too big for his head. Ethan at 21 in a cheap suit at a college job fair, his grin too large to be contained by anything so sober. For a moment, I let myself be a woman standing alone in her kitchen, the kind who can be both strong and tired. I poured hot water over a tea bag and watched the steam lift as if it were escaping. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is a flame that devours and dies. I was something else, resolved but tender, like the tough stem of a flower that still bends toward the light. The next morning, I woke early. That is my habit now. I measure my days by the radio show I like at 7, the way the sun hits the wall across from my window at 9, the time I take a walk to the green market on Sunnyside, where the farmers from upstate stack apples in pyramids, and the bread smells like the inside of Sunday. Routine has been my friend since grief first came to sit at my table and refuse to leave. My husband's gone, peacefully, years ago, the kind of leaving that teaches you to have conversations with air. We were good to each other while we had it. We were not perfect. Forgiveness is a house you build and move into. I volunteer 2 afternoons a week now at the library, not shelving, but reading stories to children whose parents need those 30 minutes to fill out forms and catch their breath. I take out my battered copy of The Snowy Day and give Peter his bright red suit. After story time, I sit in on the ESL group sometimes, only to listen. Words are still my currency, no matter what language. Over the years, I had worried that my closeness with the families at the library, my comfort with their languages, would make me a busybody. It did not. It made me a neighbor. There's a difference between a nose pressed to the glass and a hand offered over the fence. The day after the dinner, I walked to the park with a thermos of tea and watched the joggers go past in their music and their private motivation. Queens in the Morning has its own sound. Distant sirens. Sneakers on concrete. A dog's tags clinking. A mother calling to her child in Bengali. A man singing a hymn softly under his breath while he threaded his way around a puddle. I thought of Lily as a child. I do this sometimes with people I find difficult. I picture them at 7, a lunchbox in hand, nervous and hopeful. A teacher smiling and saying, "Come in, find your seat." It's a small kindness I give in my head. I remembered a thing she had said once that lodged under my skin like a splinter. We had been looking at invitations. She had put down her phone and said casually, "We'll probably move to San Francisco after the wedding. My company wants me there, and Ethan can find something. The winters are better for your joints. You can visit." She had said visit like a permission slip. I had nodded because I never wanted to be the mother who clutched hard and made the children pry her fingers open. But the word had sat in my chest. Visit. It is not about geography. It is about who imagines that they hold the calendar and the pencil. I could feel the larger conflict like a shadow, the shape of it like the outline of a mountain before dawn. It wasn't just about a sentence in Mandarin over a table. It was about whether we would be a family that left messages in the cracks of language for sport, or one that learned to lay those traps down and walk openly. It was about whether my son would be allowed to be a man who carried what I taught him. Eyes open to the person across from him, heart humble and brave. Into this marriage without having to check it at the door like a hat at a restaurant. When Lily texted later that afternoon suggesting coffee on Tuesday, I agreed. We met at a cafe on the edge of Jackson Heights, where the menu had both cortados and milk tea, and no one gave you a look for ordering either. She arrived on time, an expensive scarf looped with care around her neck. I was early, a habit I learned from buses that don't wait. We sat by the window. Outside, a little boy dragged a stick along the fence, his coat flapping. Inside, our cups left rings on the table, ghosts of circles I cleaned up with a napkin and a little water, the way my mother taught me. "I didn't mean to insult you," she said before I could unfold my napkin. I was frustrated. "With me?" I asked. I kept my voice soft because softness can be the best tool for prying the lid off a hard jar. "With..." She searched for a word that would make her noble. She settled for gentle. "With how much everyone wants to put their mark on our day. My mother, Ethan, you. Do you know what I want to put on your day?" I said. "One thing. I want to put my blessing on it. I want to stand behind you and say yes, yes to you both. I don't care what shade of green the napkins are." She smiled, unprepared for that answer, and then her smile slid off sideways. "Your presence is important, of course," she said, "but there are traditions. There are ways." "I am fond of ways," I said. "I like learning them. I learned yours because they are yours and because they are beautiful. But you know what I taught my son about traditions?" I leaned forward until I could see my breath fog the rim of my cup. We keep the ones that make us kinder. We put down the ones that make us cruel. If a tradition would have you whisper about family at a table while you smile to their faces, that tradition is not worth keeping. If it makes you noble, keep it. If it makes you small, let it go. She sat back. Her eyes went to the window and to the boy with the stick, then to me. You're asking me to, what? Apologize for a second language? I shook my head. I am asking you to use all your languages with honor. English, Mandarin, love. Use them all, full and clear. If you have something unkind to say about me, you may. But say it in a place where it can be handled. Say it to me, or say it to a friend in a way that will help you become kinder next time. Don't say it to show someone you can. Don't say it to make someone smaller. She was quiet for a moment. People moved around us, the sound of cups and the HVAC, a kind of white noise river. It's complicated, she said finally, and looked at me as if daring me to say that it wasn't. It is, I agreed. So is marriage. So is being a daughter-in-law. So is being a mother-in-law. I'm not asking you to like me, Lily. I'm asking you to treat me like you want to be treated when you are my age. For the first time, I saw something break in her face. Not the smug thing I had glimpsed at the restaurant, but a small, tired fracture. My mother-in-law gives me advice I don't want, she said. She tells me how to hold my spoon. She tells me how to tie my hair for holidays. She lifted her chin. I don't want to be told. I will not tell you how to hold your spoon, I said, and meant it with a kind of relief. I will tell you you're holding something fragile, and I will ask you to be careful. I am being careful, she said, almost a whisper. And there it was, the kernel of truth in a young woman who could dress her sentences like windows but still carry a child's need inside. I want this to be perfect. Perfect is a coat that won't close when the weather turns, I said. And I thought of all the times I had made things just so because I believed it would keep sorrow out. But good can keep you warm. She looked down at her hands. Her nails were neat, a pale pink. Mine were bare and trimmed short, the way you keep them when you grew up doing this and that and everything in between. Ethan loves you, she said. He carries you into rooms with him. I know, I said. I taught him how. She smiled then, a real brief human thing. I know you did. We sat in the quiet a moment longer. Outside, the boy with the stick had found a leaf and was trying to make it ride the fence like a boat on a river. I took a breath and let it out. I will be there at your wedding, I said. I will stand up and smile and cry into a nice handkerchief. I will learn the words I need to honor your tea ceremony if you wish me to be part of it, and if not, I will sit and hold my hands and be glad to witness. But I cannot be there if I am to be used as a joke to smooth over nerves or to show off to anyone that you can turn the knife of language in your hand. That is my line. A joke? She repeated, not because she needed clarification, but because she needed the time saying it buys you to accept something you already know. A joke, I said. She nodded slowly. I'm sorry, she said. In English. Then, haltingly, she whispered in Mandarin, Dui buki. The tones were careful and a little shaky, and I felt something tender uncurl in my chest. Not triumph, not vindication, but relief. Meguangxi, I said. It's all right. Thank you for saying it. We left the cafe and stood on the sidewalk. The city moved around us, and a woman pushing a stroller smiled at me the way women with strollers always smile at older women, a little hope for the future in it. Lily adjusted her scarf. We're not moving, she said suddenly. Not right away anyway. I told Ethan I want to wait. If we go, we'll plan it. And you will not have to visit by invitation only. She glanced sideways at me, and I saw she had heard the tone in my voice when I told her the story of her visit line. You'll always have a key. You don't need to promise me a key, I said. But thank you. She lifted her shoulder. Offer stands. We parted then, and as I walked home, I let myself think that maybe we had sanded one sharp corner off a table we all had to share. It would not be the last corner. There will be menus and budgets and relatives with tight opinions. There will be holidays, and whose house, and which recipe, and who gets to put the angel on the tree, or who brings the menorah. And we will navigate these seas like people who only know the basics of sailing. But we have life preservers. We have words. That night, my phone buzzed. A photo came through from Ethan of a row of lanterns in a store, red circles without their light, and below it he wrote, "We're going to do a small tea moment with you, Mom. A simple one. Lily wants you to wear any color you like, not neutral." And then, almost as an afterthought, "Thank you." I texted back a heart, which is not a language but manages to speak. Later I took out the small notebook where I still write words I don't want to forget. I wrote down new ones and circled the ones that had held me up all these years. Courtesy, family, boundaries, the ones that mean something no matter where you take them. I thought of my jar labeled Ethan's future, long since poured out, and of the new jar I was quietly filling now, labeled Margaret's peace. It holds small things, hydrangea cuttings from a neighbor, the way the light on the 7 train hits the skin of a girl reading a book she loves, a young woman saying "I'm sorry" in a language not her first. I cleaned the kitchen and put the kettle back on its round silver stand. I took out my Metro card and tucked it into my wallet, ready for the next ride. There will be more dinners. There will be more words, both sweet and sharp. There will be faces turned toward me and away from me, and I will keep my mouth and my heart open. When the day comes and I stand in that garden upstate, in shoes that will make my feet ache, but that I will endure because we all endure things for love, I will watch my son make his promises. I will see Lily lift her face to the light. I will hold my programs and smile and swallow tears that are not sadness, but the kind of salt water that cleans a wound and leaves a scar you can trace like a map. I will think of all my Saturdays of steam and soup and second languages, of dumplings folded and train cars rocked. I will say to myself, in a language I learned in office chairs and library stacks and kitchens with aunties who insisted I take seconds, "Mei Sheer." It's fine. And then, because I am an American woman from Queens with a heart that will not be contained by just one tongue, I will whisper what I taught my boy to say when he was small and brave. "Thank you. Please. I'm here." My hands trembled a little when I washed my breakfast cup the morning after that dinner. A vibration so small it wouldn't show, but inside it echoed like the glassy clink when I'd set my chopsticks down in the lantern-lit restaurant. Even in my own kitchen, with the windows fogged by steam from the kettle and the smell of toasted bread curling up around me, I could see it all again. Lily's gleaming eyes, the split-second drop of her elegant mask, the hush that pinched the table tight when the words left my mouth. "Wo ting da dong. I understand. I hadn't raised my voice. That's never been my way. But I didn't need to. Sometimes all it takes is to stop swallowing the little things people think you don't see or don't hear or won't bother naming." That night, I felt, clearly, coldly, and for the first time, how the weight of one pointed insult could snap open a lifetime of small, careful humiliations that I'd let pile up in the name of family. It's not that I'm unfamiliar with being underestimated. That's the beginning and ending of being a woman of my age. An American woman, yes, but also a mother with a life pressed through layers of work, worry, short budgets, sacrifice, and hope, all stitched together like patches on a quilt. But to have it exposed so nakedly, so publicly, and in front of my own son at his engagement dinner, well, that was enough. That was a line. Truth is, I'd been feeling it for weeks, the slow build under my skin, the way rainwater pools quietly on tar before finding a crack. It wasn't just this one night, this sly smile, this phrase tossed in Mandarin like a private coin between Lily and her parents. It was a collection of moments. The snicker when I pronounced a dish wrong and Lily corrected me for her friends. The second glance at my thrift shop jacket next to her mother's pale silk. Subtle rebuffs when I tried to offer help for the wedding, always couched in politeness, always just shy of kindly. A small stack of hurts, never flung, never loud, but heavy nonetheless. It's in those moments you start to see yourself the way they see you. Old, maybe, quaint, a little behind the times, a little unnecessary. A guest at the door of your own family's future. It seeps in quietly until you're not sure anymore whether you belong at the table or are simply a footnote in the story your son will tell with someone else. Back home that night, I'd sat on the edge of my bed, my knees wrapped in a faded quilt my own mother once stitched from fabric scraps, hands resting on my lap. That was when I saw it glimmering in the soft light from the hallway. The thing that had kept company on my desk for years. There when I packed brown bag lunches, when Ethan fell asleep over math books, when I came home with my feet aching, my battered Metro card slipped as always in the cup beside my keys. Not just a way to ride to another borough, but a quiet symbol of every place I'd stretched myself to reach. A life spent piecing together languages, cultures, expectations, always learning, always willing, for the sake of love. I held the card, thumb pressing into its scarred edge, and remembered the nights I'd sat across from May at the library, how she'd pressed a page of characters into my palm, telling me, "You are good at learning, even hard things." I'd believed her, because the hardest things are sometimes not the tongue, but the will to speak when you know you won't be safe, when you know the cost. Now, staring at that little rectangle of flimsy plastic, I felt the memory of every effort it represented well up in me. Not anger, but the simple bone-deep assertion that I, Margaret, had built this bridge to my son's life one step at a time, and I deserved to cross it on my own terms, not be shooed back to the shore. That's when I decided, no more. Enough politeness for the sake of comfort. No more folding myself small so that other people's traditions could have all the room. You can spend a lifetime keeping the peace, smoothing over the cracks, biting your tongue for the sake of something greater. But sometimes the cost is too high. Sometimes to keep peace is to lose yourself. I would not attend my own son's wedding as a tolerated outsider, a figure allowed for photos and then shuffled to the edge. I would not let small meannesses pass simply because they were wrapped in another language. I would not, could not, allow Ethan to believe his mother did not notice, did not mind, or worse, that she no longer remembered how to defend her own heart in a room full of strangers. I lay awake that night, planning, not vengeance, not even confrontation really. What I wanted was exposure, clarity. I wanted Lily to witness what it looks like to carry dignity quietly, and then, when pushed, to insist on it. I didn't want shouting or spectacle. I know what happens to women like me in stories when we become too loud. I wanted the truth to sit plainly at the table between us, so no one could sweep it away. I decided to speak, to tell my story, my why, my whole path to that table, openly and without shame. If Lily and her family chose silence afterward, so be it. But I would not participate in my own smallness anymore. The next morning, Metro card still in hand, I called Ethan. I invited him for tea at my apartment, alone. "Leave wedding talk for another day," I said. "I want to see my son." He agreed, tentative but relieved. I could hear in his voice the hope of home. He came with a bag of sesame buns from the bakery, still warm, the same ritual we'd built over decades. We ate in near silence, the kind that feels honest after too many sharp words in public. He reached for a napkin and then, out of nowhere, said, "She didn't mean it, Mom. The jokes. She doesn't know that you understand." I looked at him, my boy with tired eyes and a new beard coming in rough. "But I do," I said. "That's the point." He sat quietly, and I could see him weighing the hurt on both sides, the way children of loving mothers always want to solve the unsolvable. "She's scared you won't like her," he said finally, "that you won't fit." I sat straighter. "She doesn't have to love me. Respect is enough." My voice surprised even me, iron under velvet, a firmness rare in our conversations. "You don't have to fix this, Ethan. I am telling you so you know I will not stay silent. If this is how it has to be, I would rather step back quietly now than watch another layer of myself be shrugged off for someone else's comfort." His face twisted, then steadied. "Don't," he said. Don't leave. I want you there. Then I need you to let Lily know who I am. Not just your mom, but me, who learned your world so you'd never have to choose. I want her to see that woman, even if it stings. I want her to set aside the language of secrets and the language of jokes. He nodded, eyes searching. It was not easy for him, Ethan, who wants peace, who hates confrontation, who grew up bridging the gulf between parents now split by geography and time. I loved him all the more for it. After he left, coat trailing a memory of bakery sugar, I sat by my window with the Metro card on my knee. The next afternoon, I wrote a letter. Old-fashioned maybe, but the right pace for the message. I addressed it to Lily, careful script, my words pressed deep into thick paper. Dear Lily, my world, like yours, has more than one language. I learned yours because it is part of Ethan's life, and therefore mine. When you spoke over me at dinner, you did not just joke about not being understood. You made a choice about who belonged and who did not. That is your right, but I hope, as you move forward with Ethan, you'll consider another way. I would like to be part of your family, if there is room for me, not simply present, but valued. I don't need to be honored in your traditions, but I cannot be ridiculed in them. If that is too much to ask, I will step back, quietly and with love, so that you and Ethan can start your life on your terms. But if you are willing to meet me honestly, with respect, in any language, then I will stand beside you as proudly as I have beside my son, all these years. Warmly, Margaret. I slid the letter into my purse, along with my Metro card, a talisman, my object symbolo. Not for luck, but as a badge of my earned place in this new world, a reminder of the subways I'd ridden and the words I'd learned, and all the times I'd refused to be left behind. A few days later, as we gathered again, this time in Lily's parents' apartment, the broad windows overlooking Northern Boulevard, the table set with neat little pastries and a bowl of perfect oranges, the mood was tense but polite. I asked for a moment with Lily while the rest fetched more tea. I handed her the envelope. She hesitated, eyes darting, afraid perhaps that I would erupt, that the meeting would turn sour. Instead, I told her quietly, "There are many ways to start a family. This is mine." With trembling hands, she slid the letter out. She read quietly. For the first time, she met my gaze without that flickering mask. "You really learned all this for Ethan?" she asked, not as a boast, but as if seeing me for the first time. "Yes. Learning is what we do when we want to belong, even if others don't ask us to." I hesitated, then added, "But I won't diminish myself to fit the small space I'm offered. Not for anyone. I need you to know that I see what you do. The jokes, the tone, the words you think I cannot hear. And that I will not let you treat me as less, even for tradition's sake." Her face paled, color blooming in her cheeks, and for one sharp moment she looked very young, vulnerable, caught in the web of wanting to please everyone at her own table, and suddenly understanding you can't do that by hurting someone else. She crumpled the letter in her hands, not to destroy it, but as if to hold it tighter. There was a long silence, weighted more by honesty than humiliation. "I thought it made things easier," she said at last. "To joke. To use the other language. It made me feel safer, more in control." Her voice was low but strong. "You keep what keeps you kind," I answered. "You lay down what makes you cruel. I learned Mandarin because I wanted to find the ways to your heart, not to test you. Respect runs both directions." Her voice broke, a small sound, but real, like the snap of a seed. She nodded. "I apologize, Mrs. Lee." Switching to Mandarin, halting and earnest. "Dui buchi. I'll do better." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Zishi. Thank you." And then I placed my Metro card on the table between us, turning it so she could see the worn numbers. "This is how I learned," I said gently. "Riding trains, listening. Every time I used this, it was a step toward the family I wanted to build. I hope you'll understand. It's more than plastic. It's proof. I tried." She touched it lightly, understanding flickering in her eyes. "We want you there," she whispered, I want you there. And I believed her. The next day, an email came from her mother, this time warmer, an invitation to add my favorite song to the wedding playlist, a suggestion for a small second tea ceremony, just for family to recognize what each has brought to the table. An apology, folded in careful English. We did not understand how much you gave already. You are welcome. Not grand, but real. Ethan called late that night. Thank you, he said, words thick with meaning. You didn't have to fight for me, but you did. I laughed, a sound I hid too often. Fighting for you is my tradition, I said, and I will not lay it down. On the afternoon of the tea ceremony, red silk and green leaves all around, I tucked the Metro card deep inside my purse and wore the cornflower blue dress I'd saved for special days. Not because it matched anything, but because it made me feel strong. The table was spread with symbols, teacups, sweet buns, bitter melon, honey. I stood between my son and the future he'd chosen, part of the picture. Not a guest, not an interpreter, not a joke. Just Margaret, mother, new family, carrying all her languages, reflections of a life's work made plain. I poured tea for Lily, my hands steady. I met her gaze. She lifted her cup to me first, her own gesture, small and meaningful as the turning of a page. The eyes at the table watched us, but I felt no shame, only pride for the years I'd traveled to reach this moment. It is not always a triumph, the assertion of self. Sometimes the win is as simple as being seen. Sometimes the basta, the long-awaited enough, is nothing more than the quiet set down of a fork or the gentle passing of a Metro card. And sometimes family is not defined by the language you're addressed in, but by how much dignity you're allowed to keep at the table. After everything, the meal tasted sweeter. I took my Metro card, pressed it into the palm of my hand, and when I caught Ethan's eye across the crowd, we smiled, a silent conversation in the only language that's never failed us. And as the lanterns glowed overhead, I understood. I belonged. Not because they'd given me the invitation, but because I'd claimed my place and left just enough room for others to step closer too. When the last of the jasmine tea had been poured, the world seemed to pause, just long enough for the steam to lift and faith to steady. I remember that afternoon ceremony, not for the grand gestures, the gold-rimmed teacups, the crowned platters of lychee and soft buns, the silk draped through Lily's dark, careful hair, but for the quiet that settled between us as we sat, my Metro card weighing gentle and certain in my purse, pressed deep against the lining like a secret I didn't need to speak aloud. Lily's eyes found mine when she held the teapot. I watched the tremor in her hands as she poured the first cup for her parents, and then, with a breath both rehearsed and hopeful, for me, she handed it to me with both palms, fingers curved, wrists straight, the way Auntie Wu taught me so many years ago in that Sunlight Kitchen in Queens. I accepted it in the manner I'd learned, bowing my head a careful inch, humility and pride threaded together in a way only mothers can manage. For a moment, I felt every crossing, every train car rattling its tired hymns out to Flushing. Every rainy night I'd stood with a bruised heart and an umbrella unwilling to open. Every hour sitting with May whispering phrases I feared I'd forget. And in that span of wet silence and hovering lantern light, I realized with a painful clarity, this was not just a ceremony for new family, but for old wounds too. Proof that small acts of translation could stitch something torn clean. Ethan looked at me, hope flickering in the set of his shoulders, his tie askew in a way I ached to fix, and yet loved for its imperfection. His eyes were red at the rims. He'd never much liked the middle space between laughter and tears. I reached over, pressed the heel of my palm to his arm, and felt the warmth anchor us two to this new table. A table with room for old mistakes and new beginnings. Lily spoke, voice trembling but clear. Thank you for teaching me that respect, like tea, is best shared hot and not left to cool behind polite words. Her mother dabbed at her eyes, her father's lips pressed into the shadow of a smile. The aunties hummed in gentle approval, the air thick with the scent of ginger and something deeper, understanding, tentative and unforced. It was enough, more than enough. Later, as we wandered the garden's stone paths, the dew on the grass catching stray sun like scattered coins, I found Lily beside a maple in full spring flush. She stood with her back to the gathering, arms woven around her waist, head bowed just so. "Do you know what my grandmother said when I told her I was marrying Ethan?" she asked without turning. Her English was soft, the sharp edge gone. She said, "May your table always be big enough for misunderstandings and forgiveness alike." I never understood it, not until now. I nodded, stepping beside her so we both faced the quiet pond, water laced with petals swept in by the April wind. "No table worth sitting at is ever tidy by the end of a meal," I offered, thinking of all the messes I'd cleaned in my time. "But the food tastes better when no one goes hungry for kindness." She laughed then, gently. "You're kinder than I deserve." That brought me back to the windowsill in my kitchen, to the battered Metro card, still waiting with quiet patience. "I'm not kinder," I said. "I just know what it costs to stay silent, and I've paid that price before. I won't do it again. Not for Ethan, not for you. Family is earned, but it's also made and remade. One apology, one invitation, one seat at a time." We walked in companionable silence, lilies and peonies dipping their heads along the path, the world reassembling itself stitch by gentle stitch. The wedding followed, full of small mercies. The rain, predicted to fall all week, held off until the last photo was snapped, the air fragrant and clear. When it came time for the second, smaller tea ceremony, there was only us, Ethan, Lily, myself, and the soft golden hour sifting in through open doors. I wore my favorite color, blue as the sea and the sky, and every promise I'd made to Ethan under both. No one told me otherwise. No one wrinkled a nose in disapproval. Lily placed a hand, light and certain, on my shoulder before I knelt to receive the cup. "This is for your blessing," she said quietly, "and for all the rides you took to meet us halfway." The Metro card was tucked in my palm, an accidental worry stone, pressed with the shape of hope, a little battered like me, but still good for one more ride. As the sun set and laughter from the barn spun out over bottle green fields, I stood for a moment with my back to the crowd and let myself breathe. This family, with all its mismatched traditions, clumsy apologies, and the tang of memories both sweet and bitter, was real. Messy, but absolutely real. Ethan found me there, the breeze tugging at my dress, his hand steady and warm on my back. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered, voice thick, "for being brave, for staying." I tucked the Metro card further into my pocket, safe. "It's all I've ever done. Keep coming back." He smiled, that crooked gap-tooth thing that time had never managed to polish away. "We're lucky." I squeezed his hand. "No," I said, eyes glinting. "We're loved, and that's better." When guests began to leave, Lily's mother approached, face soft, smile shy, as if testing a new word in a new tongue. She pressed a small paper envelope into my hand. "For your Metro card," she said, quietly. "To help you visit, even in San Francisco. You are welcome, always. Thank you for coming all this way." The ride home was quiet, the kind of quiet that lives sweet behind the eyes. I thought of May, of Auntie Wu, of the chorus of Jexi and thank you and good night that still echoed through the chambers of my life. I thought of every word I had learned, every kindness I had uttered, every tender thing I had offered up even when unreturned. Perhaps that is what women like me are meant for, building bridges from hope, forging keys out of patience, making room at the table even when the space is spare. When I opened the Metro card one last time that evening, I pressed it to my lips, silly, sentimental, but honest. This little piece of plastic had been my passport to a bigger world, but I realized now that the true journey was not measured in stops, but in small, unsure courage and the freedom to speak, gently, truly, undeniably, in any language. There is peace now, not the quiet of surrender, but the ease that follows a battle lovingly won. My family is no longer a matter of translation, but conversation, sometimes tricky, sometimes awkward, but always real. There will be more dinners, more holidays, more fumbling overlaps of words and recipes and custom. I will stumble over new phrases, and Lily will probably laugh and correct them. But laughter now is safe, not sharp. I am seen, I am heard, and I belong, fiercely, fully, always. So, if you've ever felt the sting of being made small at your own table, if someone's mistaken your patience for absence, your silence for ignorance, or your kindness for a sign that you do not belong, remember this: dignity does not need translation. It does not need permission. Sometimes all it takes is the courage to claim your place, to set your MetroCard softly on the table, and to invite the world to meet you halfway. If my story found a home with you, leave me a word, your own story, your own moment where you found the strength to speak up for yourself. Like and subscribe so we can keep making space at this big, noisy, beautiful table. Because the journey is always better together, and there is always room for you. And when all is said and done, let the last line be this: the peace you deserve is never given. It is chosen, cup by cup, word by word, ride by ride, from the heart outward, until the world itself is one long, gracious welcome home.